Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for yet another video on this How to Creator series. So today I want to talk about subforms and adding a subform inside of another form. So what we're going to do is let's assume that we have our accounts. Our accounts have multiple contacts, and we want to add our contacts here. Okay, so let's say we have 3 or 4 contacts that are associated with the same account. And how would we do that? The best way to do that would be to use a subform. So let's do that, and let's walk through that process. So now I wanted to give you an update from the last video that I put out. One of the things that I did here, and I'll just show you on the leads module here, is I added this convert to account button. And I just wanted to show you what that looked like, because it may be a little bit different than what we did when we created a button the first time. So let's just take a look at that, and I'll explain some of this in case you'd like to do the same. Feel free to pause at any point if you want to copy what I've done, but let me just explain it so you understand. Okay, so what I did is on the lead, on the click of an action, just like we did the last time, I took the input conversion date and added a system field, which is the Zoho.current time. Now you want to make sure there are 2 of these. There's current time and current date. You want to make sure if it's a date field to use a date, and if it's a date time field you use current time. So just keep that in mind. We did the same thing as create record like we did in our last video. And then we did a couple of interesting things here that you may be seeing for the first time. So this added user is the person who's currently logged in. So whoever hit that button would be the logged in user, and that's what's going into the added user. We had that before. Now down here on line 7, this one, if you notice, I have the account status, which is a string field, and I just put in what is the status that we want to set to. Now you didn't have to do this, but typically if you're going to be converting a lead into an account, I would imagine that they would be active, as you're just at the stage of converting them. Likewise, down here, this search leads is a lookup field. And if you see here, I have input ID. So let me explain this. Basically, what I'm doing here is I have a lookup field on the accounts form. Let me show you that. Okay, so right here, this search leads. You see this search leads right here? This is actually a lookup field to the contact form. Now, what I wanted to do with this was when I converted that lead, I wanted to make sure that who I was converting, I fill in that field here. And the way to do that is you don't reference the name of the contact, you reference the ID. This is important. This will be very important as we go forward, and so I thought I would just take a few minutes to show you. So, okay, again, if you want to go ahead and just do this, you can pause and go ahead and copy what I did here. So let's talk about subforms now. So we're going to go back to the account, and we're going to go in edit mode. Let's do that. So we actually want to bring up the form. So add account form, open the form builder, and then on your left here, you will scroll down, you'll see a subform here. You'll want to go ahead and drag that onto the canvas view. Now, something very important to note here as well. You can insert a blank subform. Traditionally, myself personally, I don't like doing that, simply because it's going to store all the subform records directly on this this main form without any linkage to another form. So instead of using the blank form, we want to pick an existing form that we would like to link to this accounts form. So we want contacts, right? So we're just going to select add contact, hit done. Okay, now it's given us the name of subform. We'll want to change that to say contacts for now. Feel free to name it whatever you like. Okay, all right. So that was pretty much as easy as it comes for adding the subform. But now let's take a look at this and see what this looks like in live view. Okay. So now if we look at this and we go to the accounts and we just hit edit. Okay, now you look at this. So we have our contacts and we have all these fields here and we have our add new button. We can click add new and we can go ahead and select the information that we want, active, add the contact name. Okay, now there's a lot of things that are missing here. So let's say we want to look up a contact here. We would need to add a lookup to the contact. Okay, so or if you just want to add context directly from here, you can do that as well. So that's the basic principle of adding the subform. But now we want to do a couple things, right? Let's say we want to, in this instance, we don't want all these fields. We want to hide some of these fields. So how would we do that? Okay, so we'll go back into our edit mode and we're going to write some code. So now let's take a look at this and we're going to say workflow. Okay, these are our workflows that we have for reports. We're going to go back to form workflows, and then that is on the accounts form where so we're not going to do it on add contact, although we're looking at that field. We want to look at the add account because that's where we added the subform. So now what we're going to say is we're going to say add account and create an edit, and remember we went over this in a previous video. Okay, and then on the load of the form, okay, because we want to hide some of these fields. So let's say we'll hide a contact owner, and we'll hide converted to lead, and I think we can hide the status. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so on the load of the form, so if you remember how I like to write things, C on load scripts. Create your workflow. Add a new action. All right, now, do you remember what we called this? We called this contacts. So if we look in here and we start to type, you remember from a previous video we did the show and hide. That's exactly what we want to do. So on create or edit, load of the form, we want to hide the fields we mentioned, which were the contact owner, the convert to lead, and contact status. So let's do that. So just as before, we will say input dot, and then if you look down here, you can see contacts, which is telling you it's a subform of add contact. Now, that if you obviously if you put this here, this won't hide it, but I just want to show you. So now if we do dot, if you look here, you see all these fields that are in that subform that comes from the contacts. So now that you can see this, we can actually go ahead and go and hide them. So now what we'll do is we'll go hide. Okay, and then contacts, there's our subform. Dot, to reference, the dot is saying, okay, well, I have the contact subform. Now the dot is saying, okay, now what in the contacts subform do I want to hide? So then we'll just select the ones that we talked about, which would be contact owner. And this should all be pretty straightforward at this point. We've done this a few times in the series. You can just go ahead and add, whatever your form looks like. If you've decided to add more, or less, you can feel free to do that. So we'll just finish this up here in a second. All right, so we've added our fields that we want to hide, but let's go a little bit deeper and do a little bit more. So let's see what we can do here. So what we'll do is we want to look at this, and let's say when we add this contact and we hid some fields here, we want to go ahead and make sure, one, that they're transferring over to the all contacts form. And another thing is we want to make sure, since we're hiding some of these fields, we want to make sure that these are set automatically. Okay, we want to make sure that our status is set, the contact owner is set. So we'll want to do those things. And we're not going to convert to a lead because we are just adding contacts to an already existing account. But theoretically, you could still add those to a separate account. Okay, so let's do those things now. So we're going to go back over here. All right, so we'll just save this. And of course, I forgot another semicolon. Happens all the time, doesn't matter how far you get along, how good you get, those semicolons always get forgotten. So now what we want to do, let's create a new workflow. And now remember, we want to fill in the information here, this active and this automatically, right? So let's come here and we will say on creator edit, what we want to do is on the addition of a new row in the subform, and it gives you a brief description here. You can see that. Then what do we want? We only have the one subform. Now if you had multiple, you'd see a bunch here, but right now we only have the one. And let's go ahead and name it. Okay, and now let's create our workflow, add new action. And then now we're going to do a couple new things here that you probably haven't seen before, and I'll do my best to explain them as we go along. So the first thing here is we want to fill in, and let me just make sure I go back in here, and we want to fill this information here, correct? So now we've hit our fields, so let's actually undo that. So that won't be helpful for you if you can't see what we're doing. We want to go to the loader form, and what we can do is we can just disable it right now. Yep, let's disable it. Okay, now let's go back. Those are our users. Now let's go back in here and edit, and now we can see everything again. Okay, so we want to set this automatically, and we want to set the user as the logged in user, which in this case it would be me. Okay, so let's understand, in this subform, this is a lookup. Now remember, when we're looking up at a lookup, it doesn't matter so much what value you're trying to look at. You can show whatever you want in here. What matters is the ID that's passing through, okay? So that's important to know. Here, this is a little bit more simple. We just need to pass in the string value of whatever we want this to be. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is we want to continuously do this every time we add, right? So let's take a look and see how we would do that. So the first thing, what we'll want to do is we need to try to get this user in here, okay? So let's go over here, addition of a row, okay, add new action. Now, we need to get the user. Now, obviously, the user is in a completely different table. It is, I put it in the settings here, and here are the users. You can see the users here, okay? So how do we get them? Quite simply, actually. What we need to do is we need to declare a variable to store that user in, and then put that inside of the inside of our row. And not only do we need to do that, we need to do that for every row that we want to add any information to, such as the user and the status in this case. So first, let's go ahead and get our user. So what we can do is we can create a variable, call it user is equal to. Now we want to reference the form of where that user is at. So if you remember, we created an add user. Now, see, this is added user, so don't get confused. We want the add user from the form. Okay, so add user, and then you'll want to do the boxed brackets. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and now, how are we going to do this? Now, most people will instinctively want to go with ID, and that would not be correct. So if you remember, how can we reference this? So what we want to do is we want to reference the email against the user that is logged in. So what we'll do is we will do our user email, which is on that user's table, user email, and then you'll put your double equals, and then we want to compare it to, well, who's logged in? I'm logged in, so it would be Zoho.logged-in user ID. Okay? Makes sense so far? Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do, now that we have this at the top, I'm going to show you probably for the first time how to use the info tool, which is a lifesaver, and we'll get more into that as we go further along. Okay, so if I want to know what this is beforehand, before going any further and getting too far down the rabbit hole, what I will do is I will just do info user. Okay, and then Control S to save. And now if I want to look at this, so this is going to happen on the addition of a row. So let's go ahead and see. So now if I go, and we'll close out of our users, we'll go back in here, and let's just go ahead and edit this. And then we'll add a new row. Okay, and there it is. So now if you see, this is giving us an ID, so it's coming back with something, but this doesn't mean much to you right now other than that it's the ID, and you can always find it by the ID. I'll show that in a later video as well, but let's see if we can get a little bit more information here when we do this. So let's go back over here. Now let's say if I want the user, remember, it's always pulling up, it's referencing an ID, but let's say we want to get the name of that user. We would just put a dot here, and then we would put username. So now we're looking at the user, and we're trying to bring back the username. So we'll update that one time. We'll go back over here, close out of this, we'll edit it again, add new row one more time. Look at that, it's pulling up who it is. So now we need to get this value inside here, and we need to do it for every row. So let's do that. So we'll go back here. We know we're getting the right value. So now what we're going to use is what is called a for each. And a for each is going to be more beneficial than you can imagine for certain things dealing with subforms, because you need to iterate through records, and you'll use it a lot more as we go forward. But for the purpose of this video, and we're getting around the 20-minute mark here, so let's just try to quickly do this here. So what we'll do is we'll add in a for each. Okay, now not for each record, you want to make sure it is for each element. Okay, that is important. So now we have our for each, and what we want to do is we want to give it some variables. We want to give it a variable and a collection. So for each, we're referencing the contacts table, so we'll say for each contact in our contacts subform. What do we want to do? So we're dealing with rows in a subform, so you want to make sure that you declare a row. So what we will do is we will say row, okay, dot, And now the fields that we want to set information for to be filled in on each contact in the contact subform, we want our contact owner to be set, right? Now the contact owner is going to equal, remember this is a lookup, so it's going to equal the collection, which is user, and dot ID, okay? Give it a semicolon here. And then once we go down to the next row, we wanted to add the status. So the row, for every row that we add, we want to add the contact status to equal, and now we're going to put in a string here, which needs to be in quotations, of active. Okay, so now we have that. Don't forget your semicolon. And let's go ahead and update and see what we get. Okay, that goes through nicely. So now let's go ahead and try this and see if what we were trying to achieve has actually been done. Okay, so we'll edit this. And now we'll go ahead and add new. And there you have it, active. And it shows the logged in user filled in. Let's see if we add another one. And indeed it does. And you can continue to keep going, adding as many as you like. Now, since we're going to hide these, but you can also disable them so nobody messes with them. So then all you want to do is just go back and reactivate your load of the form and turn that back on. Enable. Let's go back over here and we can edit, add, we see. And we can have confidence that they're there. You can use that info tool that I showed you, and we can go more into that in the future as we go along. So I think that's it for this video. I think it's a little bit longer than I normally like, but I wanted to make sure you understood that this is a big topic dealing with subforms, and I'll show you more as we go along down in the future. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you get stuck at any point or have any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll be more than happy to get with you and help you out. Thank you so much. Take care now. Bye-bye.